I'm really lucky now to be joined by David Miliband, who served in the UK government for over 12 years, both as a member of Parliament and as Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, the President and CEO of the International Rescue Committee. And David, it's really a great pleasure to have you here on this
Thank you very much.
First, just as someone who served in the government and your reflection personally on this day and the legacy of the Queen.
The Queen's been there for all my life, and for 90% of Brits, they've never known anything else. And when people talk about a symbol of unity, a symbol of continuity, that's what we all remember, that's what we've all looked up to in various ways. She had this remarkable ability to put people at ease. One of the things you do as Foreign Secretary is all overseas trips that the Queen makes, you accompany them with her. Every overseas trip that I made, I would go and see her beforehand and talk about things. And she had this remarkable ability, even when you went in trepidation. It felt like the first time it was going to be the worst exam I'd ever been through. She puts you at ease, and even though she could tell you about who was the Prime Minister of Pakistan in 1961 and what he'd told her, my first visit to Pakistan, I went to see her beforehand, she had this great ability to put people at ease, and I think that helped the country, however divided it was politically. And there's this interesting fact about a constitutional monarchy. The monarchy symbolises unity, but it legitimizes political division. And that's part of the secret of success, I think.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that relationship, because it's so fascinating to me, right? I mean, you are a member of an elected government, right? You're the actual part of the government that's actually, running the country. Of course, the Queen is there as part of the constitutional order of the government that you are representing. There's this obviously ceremonial awe you have for her as a Brit yourself, but what is the nature? Describe to me the nature of that relationship as a foreign secretary going to talk to the Queen.
Well, obviously there are all sorts of aspects to it that are very peculiar. To be appointed a minister, you are Her Majesty's Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. You have to go and quote unquote kiss hands. They tell you how to kiss her hand. It's to lightly brush the top of her hand. So there are some things that can be seen as absurdities. But there's also the point that you're there to represent a particular political point of view. And what's striking is that whether you're on the left or the right, whether you're a Scottish nationalist or a Republican or whatever, that political division is respected. And she was someone who would never leak. You can't find a single record of a conversation that she had had. She'd known American presidents for 14 years, 14 American presidents, 15 UK prime ministers. Why did they all come out today and talk about what a remarkable relationship they had with her? Because you could say anything to her and you'd know it wouldn't go any further. You could seek her advice, you could seek her counsel if necessary.
There's also, there's something fascinating about the duration of her life and the amount of change. When we see her in there in 1947, we talked about our imperial family, right? India, the subcontinent, is still under British rule, right? It has not achieved independence at that point. Partition hasn't happened. The state of Israel has not been created yet, right? Like, the world of the imperial map of England that into the 21st century, it seemed to me her role was inventing what it meant to be a monarch in a democratic age. Right? Like, what is that? And no one had really done it before her.
Well, certainly for a democratic age, also an age of a smaller UK in the sense of not being the centre of an empire, a multicultural Britain, a Britain that was for 40 years a part of the European Union, a Britain that came to terms with its history with neighbouring countries that had been fraught. One of the most remarkable visits that the Queen ever made was to Ireland, to the Republic of Ireland. And she managed to make that visit fraught with enormous political difficulties and dangers, meeting people who had been associated with those who'd taken up arms against British rule in Northern Ireland. She managed to make that visit, and she managed to help cement better relations between Britain and the Republic of Ireland. So she was someone whose very modesty about the limits of her role. She didn't make political decisions. She formally appointed prime ministers, but parties are elected by the people, not nominated by her. And the limits of her role, in a strange way, gave her the ability to transcend time and change in the way that she did.
I was reading different, pieces today about the monarchy, and particularly the modern constitutional monarchy, right? The post-World War II and post-imperial aspiring UK. And the idea that by creating a fully ceremonial role, that people can kind of imbue their ardor and affection for someone that's not actually running the government, and that it cleaves off and allows people to be, appropriately jaundiced and cynical about their politicians.
Yeah, but
what do you think of that theory?
Well, they can be respectful to the monarchy, they can be engaged with the monarchy, they can be supportive of the monarchy, but they can be passionate about their politics too. And the interesting thing, I mean, there's all sorts of things that are troubled about each of our countries today.
I think that's a fair statement.
But the monarchy is something that has been outside politics and that has given a source of continuity. And I think that's been very important. Obviously, the question now is, what role does Prince Charles, now King Charles III, play in that? And there's a responsibility on him, but there's also a responsibility on the politicians.
Well, there's also this remarkable aspect that hangs over this, and you heard about it, Molly just said, right, which is the notion of popularity. Like, she was, though not a politician, a very good politician, an incredibly adept politician, though ironically enough, that was her role, was to not be a politician, and her popularity imbued social capital into the monarchy and the institution beyond what it was.
Yeah, but she didn't have to fix energy prices. She didn't have to sort
Correct.
out a
yes,
whole
it makes it
range of
easier.
political positions. She didn't have to be responsible for inflation or anything else. And I think it was the limits that guaranteed that. Remember, there's an interesting thing. She didn't want the coronation that you just showed to be televised. She worried that mistakes would be harped on. And there's this extraordinary interplay between, on the one hand, the secrecy and mystique of the monarchy, and on the other hand, the publicity that attends to it. And I think it's very, very important for a country like Britain to understand that it can learn from its history, but it shouldn't live in its history. And her ability was to help move the monarchy forward as part of trying to move Britain forward.
Well, David Maile-Benn, it's such an honor to have you here on this very, very momentous day for your nation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Chris.